The first criminal case that Bob Mueller brought as special prosecutor was against Mike Flynn, who was the national security advisor to President Trump for about 21 days before he was forced to resign. And the charge against him is lying to the FBI. Now, the judge who accepted that plea, Rudolph Contreras, has recused himself from the process, and his place has been taken by Emmett Sullivan, who is a really tough and really good judge. And Sullivan has reviewed the evidence in the Mueller plea agreement with Flynn, and he's come to the conclusion that very possibly that agreement was based on withholding of evidence from the defense that would have exculpated Flynn. One of the pieces of evidence was that nobody knew at the time that the warrant to surveil Flynn was based on a FISA warrant signed by Contreras, the same judge who accepted the plea bargain, without informing the FISA court that the dossier, which was the basis of that FISA warrant, had been paid for by the Hillary campaign and the Democratic Party. And secondly, it appears that Peter Strzok, the FBI agent who did the interview with Flynn, and based on whose interview Flynn was accused of lying to the FBI, had told his boss that he didn't think Flynn lied. And a lot of other FBI types said that that's true also. And Flynn and Mueller on his own decided to say that Flynn lied and brought the indictment. And thirdly, this guy Peter Strzok, who took Flynn's testimony and argued the case against him before Contreras, turns out to be a personal friend of Contreras, the judge on the case, a next-door neighbor. And in his text messages back and forth with his lover, Lisa Page, the other FBI star-crossed lover, he talks about his relationship with Contreras, wonders if the judge should recuse himself, and says that he should have a conversation with the judge about that. And it turns out 6 days after Contreras accepted the guilty plea, he did in fact recuse himself. So these facts, which were not available to Flynn at the time he pled guilty, Judge Sullivan looked at it and said, you have to make this evidence available to the defense. And in fact, don't make it available to them, make it available to me, all evidence, and I'll decide what's material and what's not, and pass the material stuff over to the defense, a very, very unusual step. And that could be the step before Flynn's attorneys, using this evidence, asked to vacate the guilty plea, and Mueller's empire comes crashing down. It's worth noting that two of the protagonists here, Judge Sullivan and Prosecutor Mueller, have a history with the concept of the defense withholding evidence. Mueller, when he was U.S. Attorney in Boston in '86 and '87, prosecuted 4 members of Billy Bolger's gang, Whitey Bulger's gang, the criminal enterprise, and prosecuted them for murder. And they were convicted, sentenced, and 3 of them actually got the death penalty. In 2001, the death penalty and the other convictions were vacated because the court found that Mueller had not turned over to the defense exculpatory evidence concerning the informer who gave him this information, because he wanted to protect the informer's identity. And based on that, the court threw out 3 death verdicts and 1 life imprisonment verdict for failure to turn that material over. So Mueller has a history of this kind of stuff. And Sullivan's antennas are up over this because he presided over the trial of Ted Stevens, the senator from Alaska. And Stevens was indicted for getting repairs made on his home paid for by someone else, which they said paid for by the contractor, which they said was a bribe. And the contractor said that Stevens would have paid for this himself. But that evidence was suppressed, was not handed over to the defense attorney. And as a result, Sullivan threw out the verdict. Didn't do Stevens any good. He was defeated for re-election 6 days later, and he died 1 year later. But Sullivan was so angry at the withholding of evidence that he not only vacated the conviction, he sentenced or judged the prosecuting attorneys, not including Mueller, but his subordinates, of contempt of the court with criminal penalties. So this is a very hot issue. And if this Flynn indictment and possible conviction blows up in Mueller's face, I'm not sure he can recover. I want to thank Sarah Carter, the Fox News contributor, for a lot of this information. And visit her website, sarahacarter.com. She's very good in covering this stuff. Almost every day I write a column for Western journalism, and they post it on their website. I post it on mine. And you can click on the link adjacent to this video to have a look at it. Thanks for reading.